So let's talk about quality management. And this begins Unit 3 of Learning Module Number 1. Quality management is based on three things, basically principles. We've talked about some of those principles already. Practices, which are activities by which the principles are implemented. And techniques, which are the tools and approaches that help make the practices effective. There's several categories of practices, and the first one is customer-focused practices. Know your markets, listen to your customer, anticipate needs. The voice of the customer, basically listening to the customer. Create a culture of empowerment and engagement, allow your employees to engage with customers. Develop a complaint management process and follow it. And last, measure and compare. The old saying, if you don't measure something, you can't manage something. Process orientation practices. Identify vital work processes that relate to core competencies and customer value. Determine key process requirements. Gather input. Design and redesign processes to gain efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. Look for ways to be proactive and lower costs spent on audits. Control processes. Improve processes and drive innovation. Again, practices when it comes to quality management. Here we have employee engagement practices. Understand what satisfies employees, especially when it comes to morale. Promote communication empowerment. Create a healthy environment. Manage performance. Assess engagement. Assess capability and capacity. Link to strategic direction. Invest in development. That means training. And then manage the career progression. A happy, healthy employee is a very productive employee. Management by fact practices. Use data and information to support decision, marketing, and innovation. Use effective comparison data. We're talking metrics here. Review organizational performance. Translate review into actions. Make data accessible and secure. Manage organizational knowledge. Keep measurement systems current. And that was one of Deming's 14 principles, management by fact. He was very big into that. Strategic focus practices. In an earlier slide, we talked about how it's important to have a strategic focus when it comes to quality. We need to understand our competitors. We need to do what we call analyze strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT analysis. Develop a strategic plan and an approach to build that plan. We need to manage actions, human resources to strategy. Come up with key process indicators, or KPIs. And again, align core competencies with missions, competitors, and strategy. Visionary leadership practices. We're not talking about management, we're talking about leadership. There is a difference. Setting vision and values, deploying them down, acting vision and values, creating an environment that supports ethical behavior, improvement, learning, and communication. We're building a culture. Actively recognizing and rewarding. Evaluating and improving their own performance, building important relationships. All based on leadership. So what's wrong with our traditional practices? Basically, why don't they work? And one of the things we've learned is leadership is not management. Management is concerned with producing order and consistency through actions such as planning, budgeting, organizing, and controlling, while leadership is concerned with producing change and movement by vision building, motivating, aligning people, and communicating. Traditional organizations have tended to emphasize control and organization over vision and motivation. This results in static organizations good at doing what they have always done and focused on ensuring management instructions are carried out, but poor at responding to changing environments and developing situations which are increasingly the norm in the modern business world. I think a couple of good examples of companies may be Apple and Google when it comes to those that are really into the vision and the motivation that have changed over time. Another problem is short-term focus. And it says everything has to have a payback in the next quarter, the next year, or it cannot be justified. Especially true in U.S. companies. Because of, the stockholders got to pay dividends, bonus checks, performance evaluations. A lot of it is all based on an annual basis. So everybody's is focused on what can we get done this year, or how much savings this year, things like that. Quality tends to be more long-term. And it may take more than 1 year to start realizing the benefits of quality. So sometimes the short-term focus really gets in the way, which can cause problems. An additional problem, we've talked about this earlier, is the lack of customer focus. The quote there, it says, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would all have said a faster horse. It was attributed to Henry Ford. But you really have to have your pulse on the customer and understand their needs and to be able to meet those needs or even exceed those needs. And a lot of companies have trouble doing that. They don't understand that. Next, we have the cost-quality trade-off. I think we had a slide about this earlier. Is it the perception that higher quality costs more? I think we already talked about that. Lack of systems thinking, taking more of a holistic view from a company perspective. The next one is this human resource mentality. What that means is we're not using employees to the best of their ability. Sometimes we just, like factory workers or assembly line workers, we just want them to do a single task. We don't ask them to think, their input, and that's wrong. So, Japan's been very good at this, empowering people to become involved, creating that culture. More and more companies need to think about doing that better. And the tangible benefits. Okay. Can we define what the cost of poor quality is and what waste is? If we look at this slide, which talks about the various costs of quality, we find that the most obvious tangible benefit of quality improvement is the reduction of cost associated with non-quality. If we have to throw a product away because we have made an error in its manufacture, it is clear that there is an immediate financial impact as all the costs sunk into the product are lost. Similarly, doing incorrect operation over again absorbs cost, operator time, power, additional material, etc. And a lot of this can be attributed to Feigenbaum again and his work. And the problem with many accounting systems is they don't track these costs. So the lack of clarity of the cost of poor quality in organizations has led to a lack of focus on improvement for many years. And it was only the advent of the cost of quality approach, which was based on back in the 1950s, that organizations had a financial tool to assess these costs with quality failures and then focus on areas for improvement. So in this particular chart, we see we have two different kinds of cost areas, which is cost of control and cost of failure of control, or cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance. We have prevention costs, appraisal costs. Basically, that's our testing, that's our inspection. Okay, we're trying to prevent defects from getting to the customer. And then the cost of failure is split into internal failure costs and external failure costs. Internal, we've caught the failure before it goes to the customer, and we have to scrap or rework or whatever we have to do. And external failure costs, well, okay, got to the customer, it broke, Now we have warranty costs, we have lots of different product recalls, liability claims, customer satisfaction problems. So all these can now be quantified based on the work that Feigenbaum did, which has been very beneficial. Now Crosby came up with this chart, and it reflects his thinking that a relatively small increase in spending on prevention activities will deliver a more than compensating reduction in appraisal and failure cost. Hence, Crosby's assertion that quality is free. So the benefits of using the cost of quality system is that we can translate quality issues into financial measures. And senior management accountants love to see things when it comes to, in terms of dollars. Number two, it provides a clear indication of the scale of the opportunity presented by current poor quality performance and a guide as to the level of resources which can be committed. And it provides an effective measurement of improvement if recalculated after improvement has been made. So again, we're measuring, we can recalculate those costs to see if we have improved. However, there are some issues. The costs are not likely to be accurate to the last penny. And in many cases, the costs have to be estimated, which could be a problem for some people. Cost of quality systems require trust to be effective, which means it depends on the accurate data or information that you get to various departments or individuals in order to calculate those costs. In this chart, we take a look at what waste is all about. The Toyota production system, a person by the name of Ono in 1988, basically identified 7 types of waste. And those are weighting, which is a form of waste is found when dealing with components or paperwork in batches. The first item in a batch has to wait for the remainder of the batch to complete that operation before the whole batch can move on. Correction. This is the waste resulting from a failure to achieve a right the first time way of working. Overproduction. This is where more than is required is produced, usually under the misapprehension that the company is saving setup time. It fails to appreciate the extra costs involved in working capital, storage space, and the delays affecting following jobs by doing more than is required. So I'm building extra just in case. The next one is processing waste. Over-engineering. A good example of this form of waste is where additional operators are performed that do not add any value for the customer. Additional operations are performed that do not add any value for the customer. Conveyance waste is the movement of materials, components, or paperwork around a business in order the various value-adding operations can be performed. We have inventory waste. This not only ties up working capital, but adds storage costs and reduces the business flexibility in being able to bring in new products. One of the things in inventory waste kind of keep just in time, JIT, only having a certain amount of inventory, and companies create good relationships with their suppliers in order to eliminate this type of waste. And lastly, we have motion. This is an ergonomic factor where employees are forced to undertake unnecessary movement in order to perform their task. They have to walk a long way or whatever they have to do. So that's considered a type of waste also. So what are the costs associated with the various types of waste? As we see, weighting cost, probably one of the key ones there is labor costs associated. How about correction? Rework, cost delays, inspection delays. Overproduction, we already talked about storage costs. Processing, additional processing costs. Transportation costs. Conveyance. Could be damage costs, cost of late delivery, those types of things. Inventory, talked about storage costs. In motion, really additional labor costs is concerned with that type of waste. And continuing with what's wrong with traditional practice, some other things we can look at are intangible benefits, the things that are hard to quantify. And in my experience doing quality and process improvement from some of my leaders, if you couldn't qualify something, then they didn't want to see it. They didn't want to have to consider it. But we know that these intangible benefits have a big impact and can have a big impact. And a couple of the main ones is increased customer satisfaction, which can either lead to more sales or less sales, and increased workforce satisfaction and motivation. So it's an interesting quote by Richard Branson: if you look after your internal customers, you don't have to worry about your external customers. Basically, if the people that work for you are happy, then you're going to have a highly productive and motivated team. And they're going to make sure your customers are happy because of that. And the last thing we have here is improved environmental input, reducing the environmental footprint. There's a big effort now, especially and I would say in the younger generations, but also the older generations are more environmental focused, friendly. Going green or being green, you've heard that saying. It's been very popular for the last half a dozen to a dozen years. And I think more and more people are considerate of this. They want to, especially the younger generation, the kids that are going to college now really want to impact taking care of the earth. And this is very important to them. So in companies today, we really need to take a harder look at that and what this means, going green. So that brings us to the end of Unit 3. So what did we learn? Well, we learned about some of the various practices of quality management. And then we also learned some problems with the traditional approaches, what's not working. So this is the end of the module, and the next one will be Unit 4.